Yes. We can't be jaunty out of the house. As I sit here, it's as if I straddle two worlds. Through the physical senses, I'm connected to the outer physical world. And through my inner sense, insight, I am connected to my invisible inner world. As I go through the day, I can feel myself becoming more and more entangled with the outer world, the power of the physical senses to pull me outwards. And so when I feel something to be challenging, difficult, overwhelming, there is the tendency to want to change things out there, people or situations. But sitting here quietly now, it's easier to connect to my inner world, to go inside. And remember, realize that it's the state of my inner world that deeply affects how I experience the outer world. So if I want a different experience as I move through the outer world, my focus time and again will be inside. My inner world of thoughts and feelings, attitudes and perspectives. This is where true change is based. And the closer I can get to the seed of my inner world, awareness, the more powerful and long-lasting the change. So at these quiet moments, my objective is to withdraw deeper and deeper inside, moving closer and closer to the true, eternal, timeless experience of myself, the seed of spiritual awareness. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Good evening and welcome to Interview with the Raj Yogi. And tonight's topic is ingredients for true inner change. And this has crossed my mind in terms of the connection between why it's like, what is it about considering myself to be a soul? This important aspect of Raj Yoga. And what is it about that awareness of being a soul that makes change possible, that makes letting go possible, that makes one being able to, be in situations and not be affected. So that's what we would like to cover tonight. So, what is it? If you could share just the difference you feel with your experience being in Raj Yoga, trying to make change when you aren't switching your awareness of yourself versus really an experiential awareness of being a soul on this journey.
Om Shanti. So maybe to back up just a little bit, which will, I think, connect to your question, which was really, why are we trying to change anything? So what change are we seeking? And it seems that most changes that we're pursuing are from sorrow to happiness, or peacelessness to peace, or unlove to love, or it's always in a specific direction. We have our own ideas of how to do it, and they may not actually go there, but we're trying to create a certain kind of change, because the type of change I'm trying to pursue will dictate the method I want to adopt. So that's why we look at soul consciousness. So we're actually changing back into who we are. So the change, I think, connected to the theme, true interchange, is a sense of really longing or missing our original state. So what is the change I want is going to dictate the method I embrace. If I use it with respect to what you just asked, if I use a different method, not only will it not be effective, but it will be quite violent.
Are you able to elaborate a little bit more in terms of what you mean by it's not effective and it may be violence? Because oftentimes we may not even be realizing that's happening.
I'm remembering, we're always using these more, these kind of concrete examples, but I'm remembering, and it's connected to, we had this session about aging recently. The presenter was excellent in connecting, older adult to quality of life. And so the question was asked, one of them was, say, arthritis in the spine. So the question was asked, is that just older people?
No.
And the answer is no. So we're getting people who are quite young having hip replacement, knee replacement, all sorts of things. So I was remembering one client who had to have hip replacement, not that old, wasn't from fall. And I'd watched for a long time, their gait was very unusual. You could see how it would lead to problems over time and probably hip replacement. So they did get the hip replacement. And the first question was, of course, and are you getting physio for your gait? And the answer was no. So the solution was felt to be this operation rather than the seed of the problem, which was a healthy gait. So the odds are very high that the other hip will eventually have to be replaced. So the same thing can happen spiritually, is that we get a short-term result, and so we think we found the solution, but actually it's very short term, and we can land up even further back than when we started. So we're really looking for something that's effective to create the change we want. So the right method.
And how about this aspect of being violent? We may not even know what that would look like.
Yeah, so much because we're talking about actually returning to our original state. It's not so much having to take things on as to let things go, things that have been acquired, which is actually quite, can be quite non-violent. But instead, we're trying to manipulate and control and gather and, uh, accumulate, etc. Rather than this act of letting go, which seems very challenging for us, but extremely non-violent. So, needing to, I think, before we even embark on any change in anything in life, so important to ensure, have I understood the nature of what I'm trying to change, and do I have the right method? Otherwise, it's going to feel like I'm putting in a lot of work, pushing a lot for very little, if no return.
In terms of being in so-called challenging situations, and regardless of who you are, no one really wants to feel affected, fluctuating. In other words, they don't want to lose their sense of peace. And so, how does considering myself to be a soul allow me to be peaceful in the midst of a situation which is, let's say, before I came into the study, that I can be in that adverse, or what I experience as an adverse situation, and actually be able to experience peace.
The suggestion we're making is that I, the soul, actually my true nature is peace. So it's really like a magic button. So I can be in a situation and very caught up in the situation, caught up in the aspects that arise when I don't consider myself to be a soul, lots of attachment and fear and stress. It's really like magic. The moment that I go into the experience, I am a soul, of being of peace, it's as if it transforms everything. What I've actually been trying to get through these other avenues I have inside. So I was experimenting today because we have a topic of tolerance going on right now. And many think tolerance is quite a violent quality, they have to gird or put up with. But I was just experimenting this switch, going into this different experience of self. We call it a paradigm shift. And what it does is it actually, again, our method has been so much about changing things outside so I feel better. What it does is actually change me, and I feel better without anything outside changing. The violence is everything. It's going to be so difficult to try and control everything outside. But if I can master this switch inside, this shift inside, then it puts me in a much more powerful position.
So let's just create a scenario. Just the reason why I'm using an example because it's fascinating. At least even personally, I realized that to really realize that your nature is peace. That, and I think it was actually the last session that we had, which I regret was a couple of weeks ago, but to be able to that there needs to be a detachment from the situation, but I'm free enough for my natural nature of peace to come. Now, if we were just to create a scenario, what if it's in a situation where, for let's say, many births, day by day, constantly, I'm in that similar situation where it's constantly a reaction comes up, but it's not just a reaction. There's a whole thought process behind it too, whether it's judgmental or feeling righteous and so forth. What does that look like in terms of that transition? Is it like an overnight, all of a sudden, like that doesn't bother me anymore, and then there's a certain sense of my natural state of peace, or is it a journey if there's all these other things coming up while I'm trying to experience my real self after practicing?
Yeah, I think it depends on the soul, how long it's going to take. But
Mhm.
however, that might vary. The same steps are always going to apply. And it just depends how quickly one moves through those steps, how easy they're able to, if you will, follow the directions of those steps as to how long it takes. I think it's really interesting to see that there's a lot of preparatory steps. We talk about the patience required, the understanding required. Before I even really do much of anything, I've sort of got to set a really good space inside to embark on this because there can be a lot of resistance from inside. Becoming an observer of the self. Like there's so many skills that support trying to do this and to be aware of that. So again, it's not violent anywhere along the way, but to even be able to catch that I'm doing it, to observe that in the self is a skill I'm going to have to develop. Outside of that, it depends a lot on because you're talking about, okay, I'm in that situation again, and it's the same reaction again. And so that might go on for a while. But meanwhile, on the side, I need to have a consistent practice of experiencing myself to be a peaceful soul. That needs to be. So I've got two, and I always compare it to that idea of neuroplasticity that we've talked about before, where there is the original pathway, but over time it might become dormant, and then this other learned pathway becomes quite dominant. But there's that longing to reawaken the original pathway. So at first, the dominant is going to be firing no matter how much I tried. At least I'm now aware of what is going on. That's a huge breakthrough. And then I continue to practice. So I'm going to have two things going on at the same time for however long, where the acquired is still firing. I'm aware of what's going on, but meanwhile, on the side, I'm reinforcing the dominant, which is really a huge part of seated meditation. And so both might be firing at the same time for quite a while. Again, it depends on each individual, but eventually the original will become dominant. So I need to it's very compassionate to be aware of what this is going to look like and to develop the skills that support what I'm trying to do, such as a detached observer and the spiritual understanding and the patience, etc.
Now, you've shared in previous interviews about, an unlimited perspective, a broad perspective, some context of what's actually happening in the scenes that I might be in. It's basically like seeing things through God's eyes, which is an unlimited place. So you might have mentioned this, I'm not sure if souls remember, but it's like being like having a loan floated towards you where you're able to. So if you can add that into this dynamic you're talking about, you've got two tracks going. You've got this, acquired self coming up as a reaction, and then you've got this true nature of yourself going on. Where does the knowledge, when you call it spiritual understanding, where does that come into play? And like, is that a journey as well that um, this unlimited understanding while there's competing other thoughts? Like, how does that work? And when does that become much more powerful than your old perceptions?
So this is where we get into the speed of transformation varying for every soul because there's spiritual understanding, and then there's something you threw kind of God in there. There is this connection to a being who's always in that original pure state. Um, that connection is melting away the resistance, the acquired stuff, so that there's more and more space to truly take in the understanding, which is going to be more effective. It's like having a weapon that's becoming more and more powerful by the degree that I'm able to spend in the presence of truth, if you will. So the two really work together. So I can have, and I think everyone, it was interesting. Because one of the definitions for yoga is to experience, and it is so, so different in a physical context to theoretically sit and talk about something versus to actually experience it in the body. It's going to be far more powerful. And however much we call that being able to take the knowledge in from theory to practice, and however pure my practice is, then that's going to define the depth to which I've understood. So you want both of those happening at the same time, not just acquiring knowledge, if you will, seeing things as God does, but actually experiencing it. And that's really obvious when we come to physical. When we do these workshops, physical workshops in the fitness industry, I'm not a big fan of just sitting and listening, but okay, let's get up and actually experience this. And you watch how each one executes. I'm sure you saw it in science lab, that, we're sitting, we're having our lecture, and then we go into the laboratory, and everyone's very different in the execution, but the results, how much I learn, really depends on that practical piece. I need the information, but I eventually want to practice it, experience it. And that's going to determine how effective the transformation is.
So what is the connection between that spiritual understanding and considering myself to be a soul? Because we can recite it in our head, or we can intellectualize it even when we're in interaction, but every soul, as you mentioned about the level of them absorbing it, even in action and interaction, is different too. Does this have anything to do with the quality of really feeling that I'm a soul, to really feel that separate? How does that connect to each other?
Everyone, I think, has a different capacity to come close to the absolute experience of being a soul. Now, each of us is going to feel as we do it, no, I'm there, I'm in it, but it's actually subjective. That absolute experience of being a soul. And the reason I say that is, again, just having been in a room of people who are doing fitness exercises, they're all getting the same instruction, but there's clearly a variety in the execution. Every single one is absolutely convinced that they're doing it, but there is an absolute and there's a subjective. And so the results really are going to be determined by how close my subjective gets to the absolute, how much I can close that gap. So that's really essential to serve, and it will be revealed by the results that I experience. But how much can I, get close to that absolute? And that requires a lot of letting go, which is frightening for many people, even though it's for the sake of something beneficial. So my inner work is, again, a huge part of it, is to see how clear and clean and honest I am with myself. I was remembering one of our former spiritual heads, who was named Daddy Genki, and this was her thing, was honesty in one's own practice. And I remember there were so many times, that we'd be in a room with her and she'd be asking, tell me what you've understood, your latest realizations. And I think we all know, what would happen is she'd let 1, 2, maybe 3 share, and these would be senior students. And she'd say, stop. None of you are telling me anything about your experience. So she was always calling us on the honesty piece. We're just reciting points, not something that I've really, experienced, taken inside and become. So that's only, it's nice if there's a Daddy Genki in your life who can call you on it, but often there's not. Somehow I have to develop that capacity. One of those skills that's super helpful to set the inner environment for change, is to be clear.
You had used the example of an actor, and if you could clarify in terms of, as you were saying, just in a room full of participants trying to do some moves and say a fitness class and there's such a variety. So is it in terms of the analogy of an actor on stage for them to know it's a play, that the degree to be able to have that larger context, it's a play, everyone has a part, you know, this part is affected by accumulation of you've gone through, even if they are having amnesia, all of that is dependent on the quality of whether I have really woken up or not.
Mhm. Yeah, to be able to override everything I've accumulated while in amnesia, and to get again to that very clean, pure experience of the truth what's going on off stage. That's quite the journey. It can be happening intellectually, yes, I get it, but it's amazing how much the acquired can hang around and hang on, and I may not be aware.
Now, there's a term used in Raja Yoga that you, the soul, you are incorporeal.
Mm.
Can you share about why that's so significant in terms of true change being possible?
It's like a reset. It's a very, very detached state where I am completely liberated from any aspects of the story of the costume. Or the costume's really, really such a clean space. It's like creating a bit of a blank canvas, but not completely blank. What is painted on that canvas is the eternal state, which is what I want to experience. But to be able to clear, there used to be not so much, but we used to use a dry erase for a lot during the courses, and by the end of the lesson, there's just there's so much scribbling on that board, and it's just such a disaster. And we sort of look and say, we've got to clean it to be able to write something on it again, to leave it that way and then give the next lesson with all of that rubbish there and try and write on top of it. It would be completely crazy. So this capacity to kind of clean the slate so I can just write the experience of the eternal, who I really am, which is such a powerful experience. That's really the only change we need. It changes the mind, it changes the heart, it changes the attitude very, very naturally. So I experience things very differently.
You know, oftentimes when souls may or may not be conscious, you hear consider yourself to be soul. Soul is not physical. Soul is incorporeal. Soul is an infinitesimal point of consciousness. They often conscious or not kind of go into a nothingness or a checking out or a zoning out. Can you shed some light on that in terms of what's going on and how one actually starts to cross over that bridge?
I think we've often talked about the example of cueing, that when we're trying to cue someone into a state that's become a little foreign, even though it's the true state, it's become a little foreign. We kind of have to grapple to find words that will make sense, that may not actually be completely the state, but will, from what I know, it can help to move me there. So, some of the physical examples that we use is for example, if we're trying to hold our arm, as we say, it's as if a drop of water is flowing down your arm. And I mean, it's not actually happening, but it's going to help me to get into that position. So we're using cues that are supposed to help me to achieve the experience. The cues are not necessarily literal, they're not actually happening, but there's something I know and understand from where I am. It's a bridge. And so I think that sometimes the experience of trying to get into soul consciousness is we're using the best cues we can, but we don't want to get stuck on the bridge. We don't want to sort of get stuck in the cues. We want to use the cues to carry us into the actual experience, which is completely not physical. It's really a challenge to cue, to use physical terms to cue someone into a non-physical state. But it's the best that we can do. What we do know is that the state of being a soul is completely detached, completely free.
Mhm.
It's very neutral, it's very clean, it's very pure, it's very benevolent. That would be all the feelings I would be having if I was there. I could say I'm a point of light, there's a point of light in the center of the forehead, and none of those qualities are happening.
So you could actually still think you're Judy and still
Mhm.
think you're a point of light.
Mhm.
That's kind of scary.
Yeah. We always say, okay, I know it's understood and I can repeat it forwards and backwards, but what is the reality as I go through the day? What's going on?
So it's really seeing my reactivity
My behavior.
to see if I'm really true.
Mm.
I knew that had another question that I can. And it was actually very important.
Oh dear.
Maybe you can talk a little bit more. I know we're running out of time, but
We
it's
are.
very important.
I think the main point when I looked at the theme, the main takeaway that I was truly feeling, just step one, before we get into any of the details of the method or anything, but step one is to at least arrive at the realization that the problem, and I hesitate to use that word because it's not really a problem, but the issue actually isn't out there, it's inside. Like to even just get that far to acknowledge that that's the case, that time and again, if I'm feeling anything that isn't pleasant for me, the issue, the place I have to look is inside. That already is a huge achievement. We can say, yeah, no, I got it. But then there's always a situation during the day, but this person is acting unreasonable, or that situation is so extreme, and we start to have exceptions. So I have to sort of check if I really, really bought into that first assumption, what we're doing. And that will speed things up for me. I won't waste time on thoughts about what's going on, why is this happening, what's going on. I'll immediately go, oh yeah, I forgot completely the whole spiritual paradigm I need to get back to. It's going to save me a lot of time, which is going to make the change much quicker. Did you remember?
I remembered. So this is a part of the question about tell someone consider yourself to be soul, and they go off into a zone. So why not just sort of get rid of these bodies and just be, just
Points of light,
points of light and just change there? Why can't change happen? And why isn't I need to experience that whilst I'm actually in this physical predicament? For there to be true interchange.
Right. So your suggestion is let's just wait till we're out of these bodies.
Yeah, which is oftentimes what we always talk about. Why can't it just end? Why can't it be over? Let's just move away from situations. There's so many derivatives of that.
So, to really sort of explore how the soul works, no, I don't need this body to exist, but I absolutely need it to express. And there's really no point to exist if I'm not able to express. So I want to master the art of operating through this body. It's a given. We are built to express, to experience our own presence, to express and to interact. We're actually built to do that. There is no point for our existence otherwise. So I really do want to master the art of expressing my authentic self whilst in the body. Now, some might argue against that. And this is where, and certainly I respect that, this is where we're going to see variety. Some souls are really keen to master the art of living gracefully, really mastering how to operate spiritually through the body, and others don't care at all. And that's completely fine. So, really, maybe this conversation is for those who want to master the art of living gracefully through the body.
Oh, thank you. I don't know, this is a very important topic, I feel, and the practical aspects that you mentioned at least helps helps us to really check what's actually happening inside. We say consider yourself to be a soul. And I think that we might just experiencing myself as a point of light and there's no depth.
Yeah, and actually, what happens a lot is we don't think it has anything to do with day-to-day life. So very often, one of the questions that come up is, okay, I like it, I enjoy considering myself to be a soul, but I've got this situation going on at work or with the family, and what should I do? So as if considering myself to be a soul has nothing to do with day-to-day life, whereas the suggestion we're making is it has everything to do with how I experience day-to-day life. So again, getting that basic assumption in place, on board, then things will go much more quickly. I feel you're looking for something.
Oh, just for letting souls work my life sessions. So we know we have ran out of time. It's really up to Judy to commentary a month.
I think we should have a moment of silence and just go inside and see if I can have that very free feeling. Being, just a spiritual being. That's it. Very free and peaceful.
Oh, Shanti.
Thank you for joining.
So just a reminder, we do have an on-site English workshop happening Sunday, this coming Sunday, November 26th, and the timing 12 o'clock to 3:30. These sessions, these English workshops are, I don't believe, actually online. So for those who actually live in Calgary or close to Calgary, if you wish to join, registration is much appreciated. So please visit the center's website. We always have a lot of on-site sessions and online sessions at the Inner Peace Center, and we do have a session at the Academy, also called Heavens. So please find all of that information on Calgary's website, calgary.com/kamaris.ca. If you have questions, feel free to email us, and our email address is on the site. Thank you for joining. Shanti.